Hello? Okay, that's good. Sorry guys, a little late. Thought I set it for 2:30. Let's see what's going on. Yeah. Why is mine in? Sup, homie? It's testing. Okay, that's good. Let's see now. Let's get this out of here. Okay, can't do that anymore. That's pretty cool. Testing 1, 2. Mic check. Guys never say 3. Yeah, I know. Just 2, baby. Just 2. Had a weird issue the other say, as you know, but you seem good. Always. Always good. Is my noise suppression on here? Filters. No, I know what you meant. I just wanted to be a jerk. uh Where's that article at? Oh, it's on my YouTube actually. I can just pull it from there. Didn't have it saved because I'm not prepared. But who was Vatican flag? But who has Vatican flag, maybe? You didn't read through my typo. Reported for abuse. Reported for abuse. Abusive. Reported for abuse. Okay. There it is. Gotta go into my video to pull the video, to pull the article. Imagine being such a scrub. Vatican flag is also phone. But who was? You go to meme punchline? Oh, okay. Maybe I just don't know that one. I got you, B. It magically disappeared. It used to be so prominent. Well, yeah, my camera's over a little bit more. I think you could still, if I do that and go up, there it is. You can see it because I was in my closet. It's a cool flag, honestly. Uh, then who was phone later? Okay, I'm just not too internet today. I used to be in the closet once. Yeah, you did. Do I just no? I don't do browser. I do window capture. Make source visible. Okay, capture cursor. Yes. But I want to transform it. I don't remember. It was like 50 on the left, 50 on the top. Is that what it was? Boink. Boink. This is hard, guys. Why is the size always so off? In protest of Craig's name, I shall call him Greg from now on. I do dub thee Greg. Oh, you know what? Can I transform? Dude, my nose is so itchy. Transform. No, it's 0. Does that make it like a better size? Nope, not really. Oh, let me see if can I like edit transform size. 20 1920 by 1080. So weird. It's like just off. Whatever. I suppose that's fine. That's enough. Can you just control scroll? Yeah. I'm not zooming in. I'm fitting it actually into OBS. Okay, smarty pants. Okay, I know how to do stuff. I work in tech, all right? No, I know. No, you're totally right. Like if I'm doing that, it's a different thing. Decline. All right. Can everybody see the... Yeah, looks good. All right. So today's reading, a very interesting one. One that was submitted to me by a few friends in the coolosphere. That didn't sound right. The cool people sphere of the internet. The part of the more esoteric side of the internet. I'll be resentful forever because of the disrespect, Mr. IT man. Okay, enough derail. Let's go. All right. So, can Hermetic magic rescue the church? Part 1, acknowledging the crisis and breaking the spell. So, this is a mosaic of Hermes Trismegistus. There's interesting overlap here. There's a guy, a Catholic guy, by the name of Lloyd De Jong, on YouTube, who he talks about how like Hermes Trismegistus is regarded as a sage in the Islamic tradition, which is really, really. All right, I see you, Craig. I see that comment. How Hermes Trismegistus is a sage within the Islamic tradition. So he holds that like that the Hermetic tradition and the, how would I say, I guess that's it. That the Hermetic tradition is contained within Islam and actually originates from it, which is an interesting parallel. So we have a quote here. It seems to me that the paradigm of rationalism, with all its chaotic relationships, ugly architecture, shallow sentimentalism, fetishization of abstractions, legal positivism, and blindness to persons, to which the institutional church has conceded so much moral territory, must be overcome if we are to recover the primacy of the mystical in the life of the church. The theologian Karl Rahner may have done more to undermine the integrity of Catholic orthodoxy at the higher levels of theological scholarship than any other member among the Nouvelle Theologie Cognoscenti. Though it's difficult to say who deserves that particular accolade, as the 20th century provided so much competition. Be that as it may, Rahner finally made a remark with which I have found myself in increasing agreement as the time rolls on and the decay of the institutional church is more evident. The Christian of the future will be a mystic or will not exist at all. Dude, my nose is killing me right now. What's going on here? Oi, sorry, people. Phew. This kind of parallels with a lot of what I was talking about in that article from Gainon. Can I zoom in a little bit more? Oh, yeah. Ooh. Maybe there? Is that good? Or should I do it a little bit further out? Like that. 2 steps back was fine too. Okay. But it's definitely better. All right. I feel like maybe this is probably the best. Or wait, did you mean this was the best? Whatever. I guess I'm going to do this. So this parallels with that article that I brought up with Gainon talking about how Christianity was going to fall from grace, as far as its mystical tradition and how, people are going to run to the Orthodox Church because of that, because the Catholic Church has failed the West to fill the spiritual void that it once did back in the medieval ages. There's a lot of like reasons why Guénon thought that was the point, but this is basically another article kind of talking about that same exact phenomenon from another perspective. So keep that in mind. Now, whatever Rayner meant by this sentence, I'd likely deem anathema. Taken in isolation, however, this proposition seems to point a way forward in an otherwise impossible situation. The situation to which I refer is what I've been calling for some time now the Church's post-authority epoch. Post-authority, meaning that the Church it has ceded its moral ground and its position of authority within the minds and the hearts of many. This is the exact kind of argument that two of my kind of Catholic heroes are having a fight about right now. Or it might be over now. I've kind of stopped watching it and paying attention, but there were Michael Lofton and Edward Feser. Edward Feser being a professor of philosophy, and Michael Lofton being a Catholic Answers apologist. And them talking about, and Edward Feser is basically saying that the Church has revoked its teaching authority and is going into this time of kind of recession, so that it doesn't have the authority that it once did, which any Catholic should know that that's impossible. It can't do that if it's to fulfill the teaching, or if it's to fulfill the promise that it claims to have possession of. When I say this, I predominantly have in mind the Catholic Church being, as I am, a Roman Catholic, the ugly internal power games, moral relativizing, the neo-Caesaropapism of Orthodox senior clerics, however, have hugely undermined the authority of their offices. And it's not even worth remarking on the state of the Anglican community and the various Protestant sects. I mean, obviously, you could see what has happened with Anglicanism. I mean, they fully, wholeheartedly accepted the LGTV movement in amongst their ranks. There's talk about how the Catholic Church, is large, has a large LGBT priesthood, how it's upwards of 10% of priests, which are largely responsible for the abuses. Neo-Caesarian, Neo-Caesarian is a different word, but Caesaropapism is a critique that's been levied against the Orthodox for a long time. It's because they don't have a pope, they have emperors who determine their councils, and so they've always had politics intermingling with their church. They were infested with KGB agents in the time of Russia. So they've always had too much state intervention. They've never had their own ground, whereas the Catholics have always, because they had the Pope in charge, right? So that's the claim. So Neo-Caesaropapism is just the new Caesaropapism, not the one of the old. And so Anglican communion totally fallen. Clearly, Protestant sects are absolutely degenerated in almost all forms. I mean, for those who have eyes to see, there's of course little remnants, but we're talking about pretty much the whole of Christendom really is kind of fallen. I just say LGTV because it's not going to get me shadow banned or whatever. The fact is, all the baptized are in the same boat when it comes to the current crisis. The institution that the incarnate word established on earth to lead all nations to all truth has lost its authority. Matthew 28:19 and John 16:13. Recently, I picked up my copy of Pope John Paul II's Veritatis Splendor to refresh my memory with respect to his arguments for the reality of intrinsic evils. Whilst I hold that moral thinking requires serious engagement with intentions, conditions, and circumstances, I reject situation ethics. Morality per se clearly liquefies once you deny that some acts are forbidden regardless of circumstances. But I wanted to analyze the arguments advanced by John Paul II against situation ethics. And to my shock, I found that he advances no arguments. He simply says that both scripture and church tradition hold that some acts are always and everywhere forbidden, and that this is his teachings as the Vicar of Christ. That 3 decades ago, it was still possible for a pope to make claims on the weight of his authority amazed me. This would be impossible today. The papal office simply doesn't possess the existential authority for such confident assertions anymore. Since the late 19th century, the faithful have been subjected to even more regular and ever longer papal encyclicals and exhortations. Under the current pontiff, these have taken the form of very long essays, mostly comprising observations and occasional hints at the revolutionary direction behind their authorship. hinting, of course, that Pope Francis is a revolutionary, a leftist, one might say, or a liberal in wolf in sheep's clothing, he's been called sometimes. It is almost as if the present Holy Father is begging to be taken seriously by the faithful for a moment, as he feigns speaking to them on an equal footing. This, though, is not at all how he actually governs the church, by passing canon law and settling theology as he pleases, and persecuting those members of the faithful who won't, so to speak, get with the program. This, of course, is exactly what belongs to the psychology of an abusive man. He oscillates from begging to be loved and listened to throwing his fists around. A central reason why abusive people behave in this way is because they have lost authority. They can no longer be believed or trusted, and so they resort to begging, sentimental gestures, and then violence. The hierarchy of the church has almost entirely lost authority in the eyes of the rest of the faithful. This isn't a speculative deduction offered in some attempt to explain the phenomena. What I'm describing in the situation is a matter of fact. Among the vocal, active Catholics of the second half of the 20th century, there were broadly three factions: the progressives, the trads, and the post-conciliar neocons. That third category was dominant until the reign of Pope Francis, but since then has nearly totally disappeared. The champions of the hermeneutic of continuity have, generally speaking, fallen silent. It was too difficult to keep it up. Francis has demonstrated that the post-conciliar age is an act of ecclesiastical and theological rupture, and to argue that this isn't the case has become impossible. The neocons tried to maintain their position for the first 5 years of Francis's papacy, attempting to render orthodox every one of his bizarre allocutions, but in the end, it just became too tiring and too embarrassing. So yeah, that's exactly what Michael Lofton has been trying to do. He's been trying to return to those arguments, and basically there have been a lot of people who have basically showed the futility of saying that it is a rupture, and that the trads are right or the progressives are right, and there is no in between. You can't thread the needle and be a man of both sides anymore. Among vocal active Catholics, now there remain two dominant groups, the progressives and the trads. Neither of these groups has much confidence in the authority of the Holy See or the Curia. The progressives never believed that the law of the church, the dogmas of the faith, or the moral law had any claim on their intellect or conscience in any case, beyond what they individually chose to accept. The trads always believed they were bound by such things, but see now that something's happened to the church's government that makes it no longer trustworthy, and thus they look sideways at anything coming out of Rome. The progressives are happy to affirm the church's authority at present, but only because it serves their ideology to do so. They were certainly more reluctant under John Paul II and Benedict the 16th. What this means is that neither of the two dominant groups of vocal active Catholics trusts the hierarchy's authority merely on the grounds that it belongs to the government of a divine institution. Thus, the church is, as a matter of fact, in a post-authority epoch. Oh, how much I have to say about all this. Catholics who believe what Catholics have always believed and wish to worship as Catholics have always worshipped seemingly find themselves judged as heterodox in the contemporary church supposedly born from the new Pentecost of the Second Vatican Council, 1962 and 1965, which is the Catholics' most recent council. Hold on one second, guys. All right. Oh, my camera. There we go. Since it's the AI camera, it'll follow me until it can't follow me anymore, and then it just gets stuck. Just want to shut my door. Remarkably, as devotional life corroded under the liturgical experiments of following that council, and the popular piety of the laity was belittled, Catholic dioceses responded to this spiritual asphyxia by increasingly reframing the faith as a purely catechetical enterprise. Catechesis, meaning like to train those in the faith, to teach, that's why you go to catechism class, to belong to the church, with or without orthodox teachings. At the very moment, then, when the teaching authority of the hierarchy is precisely what's being called into question, and at the very moment when the Holy Father can't stop tampering with the Catechism of the Catholic Church so that it now teaches what was condemned as heresy in previous ages, the hierarchy has emphasized its role as teacher. Few, of course, are convinced. The problem, too, goes all the way down. Catholics are as suspicious of the teachings from their parish pulpits as they are towards the stuff coming out of Rome. Meanwhile, the church from its highest echelons to the local diocese has been riddled with petty clericalism, lawbreaking, sexual abuse, and general moral and financial corruption. Anyone who follows Catholic journalism will be well aware of the depth of the rot. The clergy, many of whom are practicing homosexuals, what did I say earlier, who cannot in good conscience preach the faith, are largely managing ecclesiastical decline and are often content to say as much. They know they've lost any defensible authority before their own flocks, and this has caused them immense frustration. Many a Catholic has had the experience of disagreeing on some minor point with a cleric and immediately finding himself confronted by an enraged, red-faced cartoon character pointing and frothing at the mouth. As one priest, one of the few good ones, said to me, it seems to be something they pick up at seminary. A few years ago, I challenged a bishop over what I judged to be his breaking of employment law and violation of Catholic social doctrine. A priest soon wrote to me expressing his horror at my lack of caution in challenging the Lord's anointed. Interestingly, this priest didn't tell me that I was wrong, only that the bishop shouldn't be challenged seemingly on no other grounds than that he was a bishop. To think it's appropriate to use language suitable for an authority that has manifestly been lost indicates how delusional these clerics are. This attitude is typical of the servile rather than the filial obedience that has taken over the church's hierarchy. Indeed, without such widespread servile obedience, the hierarchy would never have been able to perpetuate so many unspeakable evils for which it is now universally infamous. The reason, of course, that so many clerics behave in this bizarre way is precisely because clerical authority is gone, and they are trying to keep the illusion of its existence going for as long as possible. Ask the author where the church hurt him. Can you point to me on the doll? Yeah. And I'm not to say that I'm like, this is not a critique for me or for the author of critiquing hierarchy. Like, we both crave hierarchy. We like it. So it's not just like a Protestant argument where it's like, oh, hierarchy bad in general, so therefore we don't like it. Boo-hoo, that kind of stuff. This is a critique of the fact that they've lost the plot. Gladly submitting yourself, to a church that retains the moral teachings, but not to one that are so wayward. That the church's ministers are managing decline and have capitulated to the post-Christian world at every step is an open secret. During the COVID pandemonium, the church's bishops closed the churches. The bishops of England and Wales preemptively begged the government to authorize the closure of their churches before the government had even proposed such measures. Pope Francis decreed that taking an experimental drug of malign origin was an act of love, and in violation of church teaching, he threatened Vatican employees with loss of employment if they failed to undergo the procedure. We all know which procedure he's talking about. The hierarchy effectively proclaimed that at a time of widespread alarm and instability, the church would not be there for the faithful. Worse still, it would help to foment the draconian measures, power grabbing, and destruction of civil liberties by state governments. For the first time in the church's history, the apostles' successors apocalyptically canceled the festive liturgies of the Easter octave. The church's teachers, in effect, declared that sanctifying the faithful, preaching the gospel, and making disciples of all nations did not constitute essential services. If the church was not fully in the post-authority epoch before all that, it certainly was by the time we were coming out of lockdown tyranny. And many of the faithful, quite understandably, have never come back to Mass. Tolkienians, people who love J.R. Tolkien and relate to him, for those uninitiated, Tolkienians will understand the overriding mentality of the clergy. I call it the Denethor mentality, after the steward of Gondor in The Lord of the Rings. A man desperately holding on to power, whose behavior and form of government is becoming increasingly erratic and self-serving, who cannot see what is required amid a crisis, who concedes ever more territory to the powers that want to destroy his realm, who rejects that one on which his authority rests, and who rewards foolishness while seeking every opportunity to crush his only remaining faithful and devoted son. That is the Denethor mentality, and is the dominant mentality of the Catholic clergy. Now, there's going to be some Orthodox, I don't know if they'll be in here, and Protestants probably as well, that'll come in here and be like, yeah, that's why Orthodoxy, man, it's the same. It's the same everywhere. I was Orthodox before I was Catholic. This is not like a pro-Orthodox post, and this guy would never say that, because it's just as bad, especially for like the Greeks, the Antiochians. They did the same thing. Russians might not have. They will eventually. Since the late medieval period, every form of check and balance in the church has incrementally diminished. The influence of the temporal power of the church, namely the laity on ecclesiastical matters, has so ebbed that the laity has no influence whatsoever. The clerical hierarchy, especially the Pope, is now totally unchecked. If the Pope has an idea, he can type it up on a piece of paper, put his name at the bottom of it, and suddenly that becomes law. And that is exactly how Pope Francis governs the church. The situation is ridiculous, and again, has corroded to the point of destroying the last residue of authority in the church. In the so-called age of ecclesiastical collegiality, which is what something that Pope Francis and a lot of the people in the hierarchy of the church call this era, there is zero collegiality. The whole thing is a smoke screening exercise. Attempting to make sense of the situation, the faithful have increasingly fallen back to the sensus fidelium to tap into, so to speak, the true faith of the ages that is being covered up with recurrent acts of clerical voluntarism. The church's government knows that this is what is happening, and thus is diabolically seeking to imitate the sensus fidelium through the synodal process, so that it appears that the sense of the faithful conveniently affirms the revolutionary direction of the governing clergy. Over the last century, the church has undergone the greatest apostasy in its history. And yet, amazingly, oh, hey, Rick, Orthodox here, as you know. While I don't like a lot of the people who are using the failures of the hierarchy to sow division and grab power for themselves, I can't and won't say they weren't failures. We were tested and found wanting. Agreed. And yet, amazingly, people are still sporadically converting to Catholicism. In the West, such people, especially young people, are coming to the Catholic Church through the traditional liturgy and wider trad movement. Indeed, a strange characteristic of the post-authority epoch is the parish and the diocese, isn't really where Catholicism happens. Catholicism has largely become an internet genre. That's absolutely true. With certain, Craig can attest, certain celebrities at the top of that. And whilst the church's government is doing all it can from the very top to destroy the trad movement, it certainly remains alive and well online. It is mainly by this virtual world that young people come to Catholicism in their attempt to escape the Manichaeism and nihilism of the late modernity, which mainstream Catholicism only appears to offer in ceremonial form. On arrival into the fold, however, such young people soon find that their new spiritual fathers wished that they'd never become Catholics. Having escaped the world that tried to ruin their souls, they find themselves in a church that officially wishes they never existed. The church's greatest modern theologians have been committed to explaining to us that the nature is in fact supernature. That's Teilhard de Chardin. The difference between a Christian and a non-Christian is one of degree rather than of kind, a la Karl Rahner, and that everyone is going to be saved from damnation in any case, from Hans Urs von Balthasar. Then Dignitas Humanae, Vatican II's Declaration on Religious Freedom, came along and seemingly canceled the church's mission to the temporal world. By the end of modern theology's process of conflating the natural and supernatural, dissolving them into one another in a perverse act of theological alchemy, Catholics were left asking, what is the point? It has become on the internet what exactly was like from 2014 to 2018. Islam is slowly becoming that new thing, and currently as well. It's not as if being a committed Christian doesn't entail some serious challenges in a world that is increasingly hostile to such a life. If it turns out that certain sins cannot in fact be resisted, and therefore giving into them cannot be blamed on you, as Pope Francis has implied, that there's no real difference between being baptized and being unbaptized, that venerating saints and worshiping Amazonian fertility gods is really all the same, and that the church isn't actually charged with making disciples of all nations because religious pluralism is willed by God, and that everyone is going to be saved anyways. Catholics may reasonably feel that it's preferable to throw in the towel altogether, and so they have. The concordat with the post-Christian world, which is the overarching theme of the post-conciliar settlement, also implies that there's no lay apostolate. Traditionally, the role of the clergy was to sanctify the laity, that the laity may sanctify the world, capturing it from the prince of this world and placing it under the kingship of Christ. Were this apostolate of the laity to continue, however, it would seriously undermine the church's new concordat with the unconverted world, implying that there was some substantial difference between a sacralized world and a profane one, which would somewhat undo the nature-supernature conflation on which the Vatican II theology of opening up to the world was indeed based. So what is the laity to do with the modern church? Carry the, I don't know what that word is, the cruets? I haven't seen that one before. Up to the altar and join the parish folk band, I suppose? The laity may be forgiven for saying, but no thanks. I have barely touched upon the crisis. I've mentioned just some of the problems faced by the church in its post-authority epoch. To cover the many manifestations of these problems and the many challenges that the church faces would require an enormous tome, which I may write someday. For now, however, I only want to draw the attention of my readers to the fact that there is a crisis, and the crisis has moved the church into a new mode of existence. The church's government has lost its authority, and the faithful should not only expect an intensification of mistreatment by arbitrary power from the hierarchy, as the hierarchy fails to come to terms with this reality, but the faithful also need to work out what it practically means to be a faithful Christian in this new epoch. Many today, looking around at the spiritual wasteland that is the West, seek to satiate their deepest religious thirsts by turning to romantic ideas of pre-Christian paganism, nature worship, and New Age spirituality. Otherwise, they look east to the mysticisms of Asia, especially those of Buddhism and Hinduism, both of which have an added advantage of easily accommodating the individualism, solipsism, and anthropological dualism which have colonized the Western mind since the so-called Enlightenment. I threw myself into all these spiritualities. In fact, a sequence that culminated in my conversion to Catholic Christianity on the south coast of India in my late teens. I am certain that God drew me out of the West that I might encounter his church beyond its visibly corrupt and decadent Occidental condition. In crossing the threshold of hope, John Paul II speculated that many Westerners had turned especially to Buddhism because the practices of Carmelite spirituality hadn't been properly disseminated amongst the faithful. Had they been taught such practices, he suggested, people would have seen that whatever they were looking for in Eastern mysticism was already present in the Christian spiritual tradition. Now, I've read John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Brother Roger of the Resurrection, and Edith Stein. Let me get an echo air quote on that one. Carmelite spirituality, which I deeply admire, is a very monastic spirituality, and it's difficult to see how it is applicable to life in the world. Admittedly, this gap was somewhat bridged by Teresa of Lisieux's autobiography, which hugely influenced lay spirituality. Nonetheless, it doesn't seem sufficient to tell the religiously hungry Westerners that they need not become disciple of Sri Ravi Shankar, as they can just read John of the Cross and thereby create an oasis in the spiritual desert produced by Father O'Murphy's weekly sermons on climate change. We must spiritually engage with the situation at hand. As the West continues to plummet into its now unavoidable civilizational collapse, we shall see the rise of all kinds of superstitions and witchcrafts, which will likely serve to bestow a religious character upon the technocratic age of bio-government, of transhumanism that we've now entered. The church's hierarchy has not only shown every sign of celebrating this diabolical trajectory, which it doesn't even begin to understand, but even if it became critical of it, it remains completely unequipped to engage with the new global regime in the prophetic way that's desperately needed. Those who see that we're in for something quite different to the interminable capital P progress that liberalism promised to deliver are increasingly looking for a spiritual awakening that will reconcile us to God and to his creation that we've defaced. And the church stands at the sidelines looking baffled at such people. The paganism and the New Age, the disrespect. The West is entrenched in what the philosopher and psychologist John Vervaeke has called a meaning crisis, while the institutional church has entered an authority crisis. I submit that the church's reclaiming of its mission is the only way out of the meaning crisis of the West, a crisis that the West has successfully exported to almost every part of the globe. And at present, the church remains utterly unfit at taking up this mission. Restoring any kind of credibility will not be the work of decades, but of centuries. By then, it may be too late. So in the meantime, I suggest that the church has before it the imperative to rediscover its role not primarily as an authority that makes truth claims by which to bind the intellect and the conscience of its members, but its role as the path, the way, as the early Christians called their religion, to encounter the God who is love through the mediation of Christ's sacred humanity in a profound and transformative mystical life. In the current situation, it seems that the remaining church's faithful will persevere by opting to double down on the devotional life. This is exactly what all the committed Christians I know are doing. They're taking stock of the collapse of our civilization and the utter sterility of the institutional church in the face of it. In response, they're deepening their spiritual lives and clinging to Christ. The reason for which the church exists is the union of its members with the triune God. And when the hierarchy's members forget this in their pursuit of worldly ambitions, God's people must consider what lies within their own spiritual repertoire and mine those resources to cultivate as far as possible the richest interpersonal relationship with Jesus Christ that they can, or better, that he can cultivate them. It seems to me that the paradigm of rationalism, with all its chaotic relationships, we read this at the beginning, ugly architecture, shallow sentimentalism, fetishization of abstractions, legal positivism, blindness to persons, to which the institutional church has conceded so much moral territory, must be overcome if we are to recover the primacy of the mystical in the life of the church. The challenge before us, then, is that of recapturing the theocentrism. Catch that? The theocentrism on which our civilization was built. The theocentrism on which our civilization was built. The gospel, which the church is meant to proclaim, is the means by which to do that. And the sacraments possess the power to effect the transformation that's needed. Breaking out of the prevailing rationalist paradigm, however, is the fundamental precondition for recovering the theocentric paradigm that is its antithesis. And such a deliverance may mean that we'll have to become more open to a broader Western spiritual tradition, which has always been bound up with mainstream Christian spirituality, but which cannot be accommodated by the rationalist paradigm and thus has been eclipsed in recent times. Vervaeke needs a swirly, no doubt. No doubt. What I'm pointing to is the imperative to re-enchant our world, and in turn, encounter the God whose emanated likeness it is. The onset of civilizational disenchantment was already being flagged at the end of the 18th century by the man of letters Friedrich Schiller, whose insights on this theme were taken up a century later by the sociologist Max Weber, as he analyzed the bureaucratization of society in the modern age and its corollary, the reduction of atomized individuals to, as he put it, cogs in a machine. The pressing imperative to re-enchant our world, then, has long been acknowledged. I want to suggest that it may require a courageous recovery of the mystical, supranatural, Neoplatonic vision that comprised the fundamental superstructure on which the patristic, medieval, and Renaissance projects were built, but which has been so alien to us since the dawn of modernity. There is clearly enormous appetite for such an enchanted vision, as demonstrated not only by the turn of Westerners to the mysticisms of the East, but by the return of theories concerning a world soul and living nature throughout the Western Academy in the form of the latest scholarly superstition, physicalist panpsychism. These are all feeble attempts to respond to the fundamental challenge that the West faces, and the Church is the only institution that possesses the supernatural power to respond properly. But to respond thus, the Church, in the titanic task of unshackling itself from the modern paradigm, may have to offer a chair at its table to Hermes Trismegistus, perhaps next to Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Seneca, and many other greats whom it has retrospectively baptized. How the Church might begin to do this will be the focus of part 2. And that's it for now. Pretty interesting. My buddy who's currently getting his PhD on absolutely loves this guy and defends him to the ends of the earth. Guy sounds like a set of a contest. I don't think he is. The AI Antichrist as fast as possible, because if we don't, someone else will. It's really something to talk about resacralizing the West. And basically this desire to get rid of rationalism. I mean, I just don't understand how you can do this if you don't have law. Like, if you don't have a total takeover of secular institutions, like, how do you do it? If you don't have a religious order or a religious belief system that has a law-based system that can govern humanity, that can govern your nation state, what are you doing? I just don't know what you're doing. I don't know how any of this is accomplishable. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think the critiques are valid. Obviously, I've held to them for years now, but just don't understand how it's possible. I mean, like, what does it realistically look like? You have, like, large subsets of Christians who go and who eventually subsume roles in government or something and make slow incremental changes. That's why that previous article in the Clause of the Sphinx as he says here, option 1 for Catholics, or you do this, or just meaning orthodoxy at large, which is largely happening. This exact thing is happening, has happened, and then a lot of people are realizing that grass isn't really that greener. And so you have basically this. So this is almost exactly what this guy, this is where I'm tying this all together. Is this the restoration of Catholic tradition under the discreet guidance of Islamic spiritual masters? That's what this guy is saying. He's not calling it that. He's talking about Neoplatonism and stuff like that. But like I said, they have other people who believe that this guy is a crypto-Muslim. And Neoplatonism bleeds throughout the entirety of the history of Islamic thought. Especially, I mean, not especially, but especially in Sufism, which is the mystical tradition of Islam, and some sects of Shia Islam. This is crazy. It's just wild watching stuff play out in front of in front of you that Ganon predicted such a long time ago. And this is just a person, of course, writing about what he believed. So he's just talking about actually he's just distilling what Ganon thought. And now you see a modern day article talking about basically exactly what he predicted. It's wild. Absolutely wild. So, or total Islamization, either through infiltration and propaganda or through military occupation. I don't think we're in recovery area. I think we're in the survival era. Maybe our great grandkids will rebuild. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Gods, angels, demons, fairies. Yeah. I love this little snippet here. Oh, guy's such a boomer sometimes. So funny. Carvalho. Look what those freaking Muslims did. Look what they did. But anyways, it's probably going to be it today. Stuff to think about. The article is in the description. Read it. Share it. Talk to your friends about it. Have children. Read them proper stories. Give them traditional mindsets. Don't take away the sacredness of their existence. I have so many friends who say stuff like that to their kids. I shouldn't say friends, acquaintances, people that I know. Kids ask about the tooth fairy or something like that. Shout out to you, Cube, for making my raise. Yeah, can I get a big, thumbs? Can I get a big wins and a big W in chat for Yakub for creating the white race? Can I get W's in chat? For sure. That guy's a real one. For sure. Big W's for Yakub for making them white people, them white devils. Oh man, Craig, that was funny, dude. Crazy. So there's gonna be more. Oh, there's our favorite face there. Rick. That's the face of conservative Christians, let me tell you. Oh, why is it like this? There he is, the face of conservative Christianity himself, Rod Dreher. Oh man. So I think level 2. Number 2 is already out, so we'll read that one in time. Oh, good lord. Yeah. Anyways, guys. It's fun. Like I said, not gonna be too long. Just want to give you guys some fodder to think about. Wanted to read with my bros today. So everybody be well. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye.